Good day everyone, welcome back to the channel. As I mentioned in the previous video, we were planning to install and set up the Quarto environment, but I figured this is rather more important. I'm going to show you the Markdown syntax and how you can format in Markdown. For this, you don't need to be a programmer. If you know how to type asterisks and a hashtag, you're good to go. You already know the 90% of the work. Now we have to remember in Markdown, a blank line plays a very important role. I'll show you what I mean in this video. So to do our writings, we need an IDE. You could use Notepad or a simple text editor, but having an IDE actually makes your life a little easier. And a very popular IDE, as you can see, is Visual Studio Code. You can search on Google, type Visual Studio Code, download, and you will find the link which is over here, and you will land on this website. You can download the IDE for your appropriate system. Okay, once you are done installation and you open your Visual Studio Code, you will be presented with a screen which is similar to this one. Now all you have to do is close this, and I would suggest to create a directory somewhere where you want to work, where you want to save your files. Okay, then all you have to do is go to the file menu and just select open folder. I have created a directory on the desktop called Markdown tutorial. We are going to open this directory. If the directory is empty, like mine is, there won't be any files showing here. So to create a new file, let's close this one first. Let's create a new Markdown file. Okay, so I'll call it Markdown syntax tutorial .md. This is very important. .md means a Markdown file. Okay, so you have to add .md next to it. We are only talking about Markdown at present. Okay, we are not talking about Quarto. Quarto is slightly different, but not by much, maybe 1 or 2% different. Okay, and it has a different extension basically. Instead of using .md, we will use .qmd, which is Quarto Markdown. Okay, let's not get into that right now. We'll only talk about Markdown here and the syntax is used here. Once you have created the file, you will see something like this. If you click on this, the sidebar will disappear. And then if you see there is a button over here, which if you hover over will say open preview to the side. You click it, another window will open on the right hand side. Okay, so whatever you type over here, on the left-hand window, let's say hello, the Markdown preview will show on the right-hand side. Okay, so now let's get into the guts of Markdown. Now, how do you define anything in Markdown? Now, the first thing that we do when we create a document or a book is give it a heading. How do you give a heading in Markdown? It's very simple. Just type hash space. This is a heading. Now, as you can see, a heading is already created. Don't worry about how it looks in the preview. This is just a general preview of Markdown. We can change this layout later to anything that we like. So the layout is different from the content of your book, the text of your book. You only define that this particular line is a heading or a subheading or anything else. This can be changed with various display softwares. So I can quickly give you an example. There is a software called Typora. And if you open a file, the same file in this application, it will look like this. Now, do you see my point? What I am trying to make here? That this completely looks different to this preview. Why? Because Typora is displaying the layout in a different manner and Visual Studio Code is displaying the layout in its own manner. Okay, as you notice in Visual Studio Code, there is an underline, but in Typora, there is no underline because we have actually not defined anything to create an underline. But if you actually want to define an underline, this is the syntax for it. Once we save it, you can see another line was added. And if you go to Typora, a line was added. Okay, so this is the power of Markdown. You only define what you want something to be. Rest is taken care by another application, which could be anything. For example, Quarto. Quarto will lay out a book according to what a book should be laid out in. If you want to display that markdown on a website, you can just pick up that same text, put it in a website renderer, and it will display as a web page. Okay, so you don't need to tinker with the actual text of your book, right? I hope you are understanding the power of Markdown. Right now, how do you define a subheading? It's very simple. You just type 2 hashes. This is a subheading. Now we have a subheading here. Easy. And now if you want to create a H3 or a heading 3, which is smaller than a subheading, like a subsection you can call it, all you have to do is 3 hashes. This is a subheading, or we can call it H3 also. Now, if you look in the previewer, the line with a single hash symbol is the largest. Line with 2 hashes is smaller, and the line with 3 hashes is the smallest. Now let's look at Typora. You can see the same effect. Of course, there is no underlining here in Typora because we have not actually defined anything. This is showing the true translation of our code. VS Code is adding its own underline. It is basically set up as add a line under a heading, add a line under a subheading. Okay, don't worry about this too much. And if you look at Typora, it is dividing the documents into this list where if we click on a particular subheading or a subheading, it will take us to that particular part of the document. Simple enough. Now, as I showed you, to add a line, all you have to do is type 3 dashes, press enter, save it. A line will be added. You can see the clean document in Typora. A line was added. You can type 3 stars, another line will be added, as you can see here. Okay, these two basically means the same thing, but not in Quarto. We'll get to that later. All right. Now, why adding a line is important? This is the industry standard for scene breaks in fiction or pausing for a workbook exercise in a non-fiction. Let's talk about text formatting. How do you italicize a word? Let me show you. This is a line of text. This has no meaning. Now, we want to italicize this particular text, the word text. How do you do it? In Word, you select it, you click the italicize button, and it italicizes the text. Okay, but not here. To italicize, all you have to do is type a star in front of the word and another star next to the word. Okay, as you can see in the preview, the word text has now been italicized. This can work on the whole sentence also. So if you want to italicize multiple words or a sentence, all you have to do is select that particular line and put stars in front of it. So here you can see this whole sentence was italicized. And now, how do you emphasize a text or make it bold in simple words? Let's make this word bold, or let's just make this whole sentence bold. We'll start from the word has. All you have to do is type 2 stars and end with 2 stars. Now this is highlighted in blue, but here in the previewer, you can clearly see that has no meaning has been set to bold. We'll go to Typora Markdown previewer, and over here also you can see this is a line of text was italicized, and this has no meaning was made bold. And if you select here in Typora, if you click on any word or a sentence that has some formatting, it will actually show you what formatting was used. And if you click on here, it will show you the single stars to showcase the formatting used here. Okay, pretty simple. Now the question is, how do you italicize and make the text bold? How do you use both of them together? It's pretty simple, like really obvious if you think about it. All you have to do is type 3 stars. This is a bold and italic text, and with 3 stars. As you can see in the preview, it is bold and it has been italicized. Extremely simple. Now, another formatting technique that some people use is striking some text. So how do you do that? Let's type something. This line has a strike through. Okay, now how do you do it? Pretty simple. All you have to use is this symbol and this symbol. Now the text has been striked through. This symbol is called tilde. Okay, it is right above your tab key. You will have to use shift to display this symbol. All right, pretty easy. And let's quickly look at Typora. How is that going? As you can see, it is showing both the formatting lines that we used here. When you click on it, it shows 3 stars to make it bold and italic. And if we click on this one, it shows 2 tilde symbols at the starting and at the end of the text to strike through the text. By the way, if you're using Typora, you can type here also, typed on Typora. Now you can add the formatting, etc. When you press enter, that will add the formatting. And if you go back to the Visual Studio Code, the line was added to our .markdown file, and now it is also displaying in the Markdown previewer. So no need to stress out too much about formatting over here, or rather the layout of your document over here. Okay, we just work on our text, and if we want to add some kind of formatting, we just use these simple codes or syntax of Markdown to set it up. It will never break, basically, what my point is. Now, how do you create a list in Markdown? Let's do this. The following is a list. You have to make sure that you add a blank line. I told you earlier in the video, create a list. Once you give it a heading, if it has an heading, you have to give a blank line after that. So to create a list, an unordered list, all you have to do is either use this symbol, the dash, or use a star. Okay, if you use a dash, you see a bullet point getting created over here. Similar thing, if you use the star symbol, a bullet point gets created here. I generally prefer using a dash. This is the first item in the list, dash, and this is the second item. All right, pretty simple. Now you press enter twice to get a blank line between the list, and then from there we continue our writings. Now if you want to create an ordered list, how do you do that? Following is an ordered list. All you have to do is type first item, 1 dot. I forgot to add the dot. What happens if we say 1 dot second item? Can you see what just happened? I said I only wrote 1, but in the final formatting, it actually updated to 2. Now, if we look at Typora, same thing has happened here. By the way, once you finish a list, it is good to give 2 blank lines of space because the formatting was breaking over here. Okay, so each software may interpret the code slightly differently. Okay, but we are going to only use Quarto as our layout manager, so it has its own ways. I'll define those ways and we'll focus on that. All right, don't stress out too much about it. Just to be safe, give 2 lines of space. Okay, so as I was saying, I only added 1 to the second item also, but it updated it to 2. So if you are like, what if I have a long list, maybe 50 items, right? And I add an item in the middle of the list, let's say on number 15th, then will I have to update everything after that? No, you don't have to. Or you just keep on writing like this third item, and it will automatically update the numbers in our final layout. All right, easy enough. Now, how do you create a nested list? Let's check it out. This is a nested list. Let's create an unordered nested list. This is the first item. Now, how do you create a nested list? Because if you type it like this, this is a nested item. As you can see in the previewer, it is incorrect. It is pretty simple. All you have to do is add 2 spaces in front of that item, and that item gets nested under the first item. And now if you continue typing your list, second item, it goes back to normal. But if you want to add another item in the nested list, this is the second item in the nested list. Okay, understand? Pretty simple. Nothing to worry about here. No worries, oh man, my lists aren't aligning properly, or oh, I pressed enter here and suddenly the list has gone haywire. Nothing. No, you just keep working. You want to add something. This is another item. See how this becomes so easy. You actually, while you're typing or you're creating a document, you don't have to worry about the layouts and formatting and this and that, or why it is breaking, it is not looking good, oh my heading suddenly changed and it is the text is the line spacing is different and this and that and all that rubbish that we deal with a word processor. Okay, now let's quickly look at Typora, and as you can see, the nested list was created as expected. Okay, let's move on to our next item. How do you quote a text? Extremely simple. All you have to do is type this symbol, the greater than symbol, and you type your text. This is the quoted text. Okay, as you can see in the previewer, it has a special formatting now because it is considered a quoted text. In the Typora, it is displaying the quoted text this way. Okay, why you may need to use the quoted text? It is perfect for chapter epigraphs, quoting reviews, or citing other works in non-fiction. All right, so you may be using it depending on what kind of writings you're doing, but you should know just for your knowledge. Now, how do you, let's say, add a hyperlink? We know how to do that in Microsoft Word. How do you do it here? Quite simple. You create square brackets, type the text. This is a hyperlink, and then our simple standard brackets, and then the link. So let's say I want to add the link to the VS Code download page. All you have to do is put the link inside those brackets. Okay, now the hyperlink is created. As you can see, if we hover in the previewer, if we hover over this, click on it, it opens the browser window. You can straight away go to that link. Pretty simple. Now, how do you add an image to your document? That's also quite similar to adding a hyperlink. The syntax for that is exclamation mark in the square brackets. This is the alt text. This will appear when an image is not found. Then simple brackets. And here you can give the link to your image. I'll quickly show you my directory structure. My working directory is Markdown tutorial, which can be seen over here. This is the same directory. And I have created a subdirectory inside the directory called images. Inside that, there is an image called wp.png. Okay. Now I want to insert this image to my document. Now all I have to do is images / see in Visual Studio Code, it will automatically pick up all the files inside that images directory. So first we type images. That is the name of the directory. This could be anything. You can name it photos or visuals or whatever you're naming it. I suggest you put all your images inside a subdirectory. You can put it in the root directory also, but I don't suggest that. Okay, so you said images / now it is showing all the files inside that directory. Our file was wp.png. It is showing that. We press enter. That's it. Now the image is being displayed in our document. Okay, pretty simple. We don't have to worry about the formatting or it is breaking out of the page or it is getting chopped and cropped or whatever. Same thing goes with Typora. The image has been inserted nicely. There are ways to resize this image. We are not getting into that right now because that is for the advanced level. Okay, let's move on. By the way, if the image is not found, let's say we named the image incorrectly or it was deleted or whatever, basically the image was not found, let's say this case, and image will disappear and our alt text will show in our document like this with the broken image icon. Okay, pretty simple. Let's remove the underscore and we get our image back. Right, the next syntax might not be useful for everyone, but maybe for the few programmers among you, this could be highly useful. So how do you insert a code block? Or let's talk about how do you display the inline code. To display an inline code, all you have to do is type this symbol, which is right above your tab key, and here you can put some code. You can go to the next line and put some code. Let's say print this, and then you end with that same symbol. And as you can see, the inline code is now displayed as a piece of code. By the way, if you're wondering, this symbol is called a backtick. Now, how do you add a code block? All you have to do is type 3 backticks. Now here you can add your code. Let's say A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals A plus B, print C, and then you end your code with this, your code block with this symbol. Now in the preview, you can see this whole code block is now inside a box. Okay. Now let's quickly look what Typora is doing. Here, print this is now displayed as an inline code and the remaining code is displayed as a code block, right? This could be useful if you are writing educational books related to coding and something like that. So you might be using this a lot, but this is not for everybody. Now, finally, let's talk about creating tables. We all know how tedious it is to create tables in Microsoft Word or any other word processor. But here it is much simpler, but you might find it a little tedious also. Let me show you how to create tables here. First of all you have to do is type the pipe symbol, the straight line, then the header, the whatever the name you want to give here, then another pipe symbol. I'm going to create 2 rows, okay, to say second header, just to differentiate it. I don't want it to look like, both are similarly named. Then another pipe symbol, then you 2 dashes. You could align it with your previous text. That is up to you, but you don't need to. You can simply type it like this. Also, make it shorter. It will still work. If you are adding another header, let's say header 3 and the pipe symbol, make sure to add this again. If you look at the previewer, if I don't add the last one, it breaks because it is not seeing the correct syntax. It is just thinking that this is just plain text. Okay, so make sure if you are adding more rows, you update this line also. This is slightly tedious, but you don't need to worry about this. You can just, whatever table you need to create, there are online tools where you can just paste your text, ask it to create a markdown syntax for it, and you can just paste that code with your text in it in the markdown file. It makes it much easier. It is not as difficult as it might seem. Okay, let's move on to the next line. How do we add items to this table? So we'll say item 1, item 2. You can see the table is getting updated as we are typing. Okay, then we'll say item 3 and we will close our table. We'll add another line of items and we'll say text 1, text 2, text 3. It has updated the table accordingly. This heading relates to these 2 items. Sorry, this one and this one. This heading relates to this and this. And finally, this one relates to this and this. Okay. Once you have created your table, I'm just giving you a positive point about this tedious way of doing tables. This is the only painful thing about Markdown. But as I mentioned earlier, there are online tools that can, convert your tables into Markdown code. Yeah, what I was saying, doing this way, once you have created your tables, you can update your layout later on in whatever application you are using. Let's say Quarto or Typora or maybe the Visual Studio Code previewer. Your underlying table is not being touched. Only the layout layer or the rendering layer is getting touched based on your underline text. Now let's look at the Typora preview. It is completely different to our Visual Studio Code preview. As you can see, it has properly made a box and then added items and so on. So this Typora is rendering the table in its own way. Visual Studio Code is rendering this table in its own way. Okay, and similarly, Quarto will render it in its own way, which is the way that we want for our books. So these are the basics of Markdown formatting, how you can add things and, add a heading, subheading, or a H3 heading, how you can italicize, or you can bold some text, or you can do both, strike through some text, and how you can create unordered lists. Unordered lists are basically those which has no numbering or it has bullet points. And then we created an ordered list, which is 1, 2, 3. And remember, you don't need to give each item its number. Just keep typing 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. The renderer will automatically update the list. And then we also learned how to create a nested list. And then I showed you how to add quoted text. Then we created a hyperlink. Then we added an image. Then we added some inline code. Then a code block. And finally, how we created a table. Okay, so we have covered the basics. Now you should have a better understanding of how the Markdown workflow actually works. So slowly and steadily, once you keep working on it, you will get a hang of it. All right, so don't really get stressed out. It is much more fun than you imagine. All right, thank you for watching the video. I hope you learned something useful, And in the next video, finally, I'll show you how you can install Quarto in your system, create your first book, the working environment, and from there, we'll move on to creating an actual dummy book. All right. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.